this strategy by the former president announcing that he could be indicted, calling protesters to come out, so notable that House Speaker McCarthy said, well, no, that's not what he meant. What's behind this strategy? He clearly sees this as an opportunity to rally his base.
And I think it's exactly what we've seen occur, right? I mean, even Republican critics of his who have been trying to distance themselves from the former president have come out. You've seen Mike Pence, you've seen now Ron DeSantis, potential rivals of his, ultimately rally around him. And I think that it's, I mean, look, politically, I would say it was rather strategic of him to do. I think it also, though, raises the question that I've been saying for a long time, which is that I think the Republican base is still very enamored with Donald Trump, and it is extremely difficult to separate themselves. And this is a case, you know, test proof of that.
Yeah, Doug, unpack what we've heard from Republicans and Ron DeSantis in particular, because he got that laugh line there, poked a little fun at the situation broadly, but was very much in line with what we've heard from other Republicans attacking DA Alvin Bragg.
Yeah, the Ron DeSantis statement had something for everybody. If you wanted to find the anti-Trump piece, it was there. If you wanted to find him backing Trump, it was there. Yeah. DeSantis, more than any other Republican right now, I think is operating in a very strategic way. Everything he does or doesn't do is very intentional. He didn't come out and say anything immediately. He wanted to see what everybody else was saying. Saw that they were all backing Trump, knew he had to do that as well, and he reminds Republican voters who, yes, they're still enamored with Trump, but are also sort of exhausted that this always continues, right? Maybe not that 30% part of the party that's never going anywhere on Trump, but that 70 that liked him or didn't, but they're just ready to move on. There's your reason why. And I think you'll see DeSantis try and use other opportunities to say things like that.
Yeah, Teresa, what are your thoughts? And do you think this energizes his base?
So I actually thought the DeSantis piece was so clever because he dropped the name George Soros because he knows that makes money. That is a fundraising tool for his newsletters and his base. And then he poked fun at the president, trying to say, I am a candidate, I have his values, but I don't have his luggage. Let me make sure I don't have his baggage. So I am the person that you should be considering. So I thought, to your point, it reminded me, he was very actually Trump-esque, and he had a little bit for everybody, but it all pointed back to making sure he looked like the person that should be the next candidate for the Republican Party.
I'm glad you bring up the George Soros line because, Doug, a lot of people hear that as a dog whistle.
It absolutely is.
I mean, is there a risk in that in a general election?
Well, we have a million risks when we come to general elections on this, right? We look at what Trump's doing as being very smart in what he's doing for the primary. In the general, indictment, really bad. You don't want to do that. When I see Republicans throw the word George Soros out there, yes, it can be a dog whistle. I also think it says quite often, I don't have anything substantive to say, so that's part of the Mad Lib word salad that I'll add to it.
Yeah, but I think the challenge with George Soros is we also recognize the anti-Semitic undertones that dog whistle has, and I think it is he is naming that in a way that we as a public have to understand what that dog whistle actually signifies for a particular part of the Republican base.
I mean, it also, though, is saying, and this is what I've heard from all the Republicans as far as that it's a politically charged action. And I mean, that's what he's saying, I guess, by naming Soros.
Yeah, the thing that really strikes me about this moment is that here you have the former president calling protesters to come out. And, you know, McCarthy very quick to say, no, we don't think people should protest. Is there a concern that, not that this will replicate what we saw on January 6th, but it does have similar tones.
It has those echoes, right? And then definitely those parallels. And I believe even today at the White House, they were asked sort of about national security concerns. And our understanding right now is that the White House isn't really preparing for anything out of the ordinary for tomorrow if there were to be an indictment. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody could have heard the former president's words and not felt like there was this very eerie echo to his rally the troops ahead of January 6th.
And that's part of the challenge with the Republican messaging here is if this is outrageous and politically motivated and a witch hunt and all of that, as you say it is, well, then it should be protested. The natural thing to do is to go to protest it. But Kevin and the other Republican leadership know, oh, God, don't come here again. They know what the stakes are.
Well, and I think that the fact that there was no red wave along of this, the Republicans realized that they don't have the crowd. And part of it was because of the January 6th committee did such a great job of exposing the big lie to the majority of Americans that included a lot of independents and moderate Republicans. I mean, if you recall, there was a couple of the folks that were prosecuted saying, I went there because I thought that my democracy was under attack, and then I learned of the big lie. And I think those are the people that he was trying to mobilize that now cannot.
Yeah, well, I'm curious, Maria Teresa, how should the president respond? We've at the White House have all been working our sources. I haven't gotten very far in terms of figuring out what they think is very good it's going to be. But do you think once he announces he's running for office, which is the expectation, should he talk about this or should he not?
Well, I think first of all, the fact that he's letting the Justice Department and he's allowing the New York DA to do their job. He's like, this is. No one is above the law. And this idea that let's actually focus on Georgia when you broke the law in New York, that's nonsense. Everybody should be prosecuted. And I think what he's going to do is continue to say, we have the best law enforcement, the best laws on the books, and the best institutions, and let that take its course for whatever should be Trump's fate.
Asma, what are your sources telling you, if anything?
I don't know anything about how he would actually respond to this, but I mean, I do think it's a very delicate argument for the president to make, right? President Biden, about his predecessor. I mean, look, I think we can get some clues, maybe looking at how he navigated the midterms, which was to speak broadly about democracy being on the ballot without always explicitly calling out his predecessor by name.
On the issue of President Biden, today he issued his first veto, essentially a GOP effort to curtail retirement planners' ability to take other factors into account when making retirement plans, like the environment, social and governance factors. What do you make of this veto? What's the significance?
Well, as you said, it's his first veto, and that in and of itself, I think, is significant, right? Because he's now dealing with a Republican House, and that shows, you know, sort of just the challenges that he faces. But ultimately, you know, we were, I think, discussing this earlier, that President Biden has to navigate, I think, a very a sort of difficult terrain as he figures out, and likely is going to run for re-election, where he's going to be, right? And there are some places and some issues where we've seen him move to the middle, whether that's on crime, whether that's even on issues of climate at times. Yeah. And in this, I think we saw a recognition of where the base of the Democratic Party is. This was, in and of itself, a rule created by his own Department of Labor.
You're absolutely right. We've seen him move to the middle on a number of different topics, which have frustrated progressives, Maria Teresa, but they're also giving him the room to do it.
Exactly right. And I think it's because he's preparing his candidacy for 2024, and he recognizes that he needs a wide breadth of voters in order to maintain the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so you're seeing him tack more right, but it's because he gave so much to the progressives in the beginning 2 years of his term.
Doug, what do you make of this, and how will Republicans play this in the general election? Does it make him a stronger general election candidate, or do you think they're going to start pouncing?
Oh, they'll start, and I mean, they already have started. What was interesting to me about Biden's statement is he told us exactly how he's going to run for re-election. This was a MAGA bill that he vetoed. He made it very clear on that. And so this is very consistent with what he was saying last year, and he's going to continue. That's his 2024 message.
Yeah, he thinks it worked in the midterms, and he's clearly doubling down on that. All right, thank you so much, Asma, Maria, Teresa, and Doug. Great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.